Let's see. As I travel through this pilgrim's land, there is a friend who walks with me. Leads me safely through the sinking sand. It is the Christ of Calvary. This would be my prayer every morning. Take it, help me do the best I can. For I need thy light to guide me day and night. Blessed Jesus, hold my hand. Blessed Jesus, hold my hand. Yes, I need in every hour. Through this land, this pilgrim land, guide me by saving power. Hear my plea, only. Dear Lord, look down on me. When I kneel in prayer, blessed Jesus, hold my hand. Let me travel in the winding path that I may see the blessed way. Keep me that I may be holy, I can sing redemption songs someday. I will be a soldier brave and true, and ever firmly take a stand. As I onward go and daily meet the foe, blessed Jesus, hold my hand. Blessed Jesus, hold my hand. Yes, I need every hour. Through this land, this pilgrim land, guide me by saving power. Hear my plea, holy. Lord, dear Lord, look down on me. When I kneel in prayer, blessed Jesus, hold my hand. When I wander through the valley, before the setting of the sun, lead me safely to the land of grace, and fire crown of life have won. I have put my faith in thee, dear Lord, that I may reach the golden strand. There's no other friend on whom I can depend. Blessed Jesus, hold my hand. Blessed Jesus, hold my hand. Yes, I need thee every hour. Through this land, this pilgrim land, guide me by saving power. Hear my plea, only. Lord, dear Lord, look down on me. When I kneel in prayer, blessed Jesus, hold my those would be in your page 436, 936 will be the song of petition. Yes, ma'am.
Could you please clarify which Wendy and whoever it was? You said Wendy and Steve. Then
Wendy and
Wendy and Langley.
Langley.
It's the Langleys, okay.
Yeah, and Mike.
Okay.
It needs to be changed. You need to do it now, wouldn't it? Waiting for that door to close. You know, if we asked them to leave, they wouldn't like us. Explains what happened there. All right, we're in Joel chapter 3, last chapter. And all the Bibles and everything I look at, let's title up where God judges the nations. And it's an interesting thing sometimes because we get people in, especially looking at the Old Testament, and they tend to think about God only judging Israel because of God saying they are his chosen people, as if only Israel was supposed to follow God. Was that really what God expected?
No, but it's a difficult thing because we're not sure how he communicated with them.
Well, that's it. We don't know how he communicated, but we also know that at times he communicated through Israel to those other nations. And there were expectations. And something I saw today that made me think, and it was Kyle Butt talking, who works with Apologetic Press. And he said the thing we tend to do if we're not careful is neglect the basics. And we think of our young people as having the basics, and we want to focus on all those things. And yet, in stumbling in his work, he said, he stumbled across that 70% of young people will actually question their faith and whether or not they should believe in God. And that is young people in the Lord's church. It is scary, but when you think about it, you go back to Joshua, and it says there arose a generation who did not the things they did. Was it that they weren't passed down, or was it they hadn't seen them firsthand, or it wasn't instilled in them? And that comes back, you look at the patriarchal, the nations that were under that patriarchal covenant still, who was expected to pass down everything and instill it in their people? The patriarchs, the heads of the houses, and if they failed to do that, and even Deuteronomy verse 6 is telling that the nation of Israel, that they, as heads of their own family, not even those judges, the person, the father, the grandparents, and everyone were to be sitting there and constantly talking about the law in front of their children, instilling that basics. And so when we start thinking about that, it's just like Paul makes a statement in Acts 17:30, God calls all men to repentance. In reality, he was always calling all men to repent. He expected all men to follow him. And just because he made a special covenant with Moses, didn't let the rest say, hey, we're not amenable. Okay, I don't know what happened there. Which one of these mics is on? This one's on. Okay. All right. So we have to think about that. And I think that's one of the reasons that God looks at it. Now, this is for behold in those days, and at that time when I bring back the captives Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations. This is leaning on what Paul says. God is calling all nations to repentance. Notice, bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there on account of my people, my heritage Israel. Indeed, what have you to do with me, O Tyre and Sidon, and all the coast of Philistia? Will you retaliate against me? But if you retaliate against me, swiftly and speedily I will return your retaliation upon your own head. What nation can rebel against God and survive? It's interesting because he's already telling them, I've got something against you. Notice, because you have taken my silver and my gold and have carried into your temples my prized possessions. Also the people of Judah and the people of Jerusalem you have sold to the Greeks, that you may remove them far from their borders. Sometimes when you go back and study some of the things that the other nations had done, it's like there was some jealousy over Israel being that chosen nation. Why did Rahab the harlot hide the spies?
She had heard what had happened in Egypt
When they came out of Egypt,
and with the Amorites.
and what had happened with the Amorites, not just she had heard it, but all of Jericho. That's why Jericho was in fear. On her hand is, she sees it that if God is going to be with them there, he's going to be with them here. And the only way I save my house is by helping Israel.
Ron said they had all heard it, but it moved her.
It moved her.
That's the way the gospel is today. There's a lot of people here, but it only moves some.
It only moves some. But here comes the point. Here was a realization on her hand. God has done this, and he's been doing it for 40 years, and now they're coming here. We're not going to be able to stop them. And the ones that are going to try and stop them, they're going to fall. So the best thing I can do is help and make a covenant with them.
They're like 600,000 strong.
Yeah, 600,000 strong. But at the same time, what did it take for Israel to destroy Jericho? Did Israel do it, or did God do it? They didn't do like, they didn't do like Alexander the Great did to Tyre. He didn't build big siege walls and just to put a siege in and slowly destroy the walls till they came down. The people didn't do it. God marched around the city. I'm sure it probably did more to strike panic into the people than it did to cause that wall to fall. God caused those walls to fall. But it probably did help their hearts faint that when those walls fell, they're like, oh no, we are undone. So,
And the message was not to be afraid of Israel. The message was to be afraid of Israel's God.
that's right. How many got that message?
One.
Just one that we know of, one in her household. And look how God rewarded her. She's in the lineage of Christ. She tell us something about when we fear God, how He will respect us. Turn to Him. But no, notice God says, I'm tired, I'm going to hold you together. You sold out my people to the Greeks. Did that spare Tyre and Sidon from the Greeks?
Scrape him off the map.
They thought, I don't know if you understand about Tyre and Sidon, that one part was on the land, and the other part was a little island. And whenever they had problems, they would all go, someone's taxi, they'd all flee to that island, they couldn't get to them, and it'd all be good. A few years go by, they come back to the land. Well, Alexander the Great tore down the city, used everything from the city, all the destruction from the city, and piled it into the seas till he built a causeway to get out to that island. God led him there. No, behold, I will raise them out of the place to which you have sold them, and will return your retaliation upon your own head. I will sell your sons and your daughters into the hand of the people of Judah, and they will sell them to the Sabaeans, to the people afar off, for the Lord has spoken. You turn against my people, what's going to happen to you? What happened to Rome? It persecuted the church, it tried to drive it, it tried to take over it. When it took over, it would still persecute those who were trying to live faithfully to the Lord. It tried to keep the word out. It's not the power it was today, it was then. That selling and carrying off basically is a way of taking them out of existence. Proclaim this among the nations, prepare for war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come out. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. That isn't interesting. God is telling them, beat your plowshares into swords and pruning hooks into spears. Yet he says his people will beat their spears into pruning hooks and their swords into plowshares. He's telling them, you can do whatever you want. And whatever weapons you can forge will not stand against me. Assemble and come, all you nations, and gather together all around, cause your mighty ones to go down there, O Lord. The valley of Jehoshaphat was a valley of war, a battle. And God is telling them, bring them on. Bring on your mighty men, and you're going to fall. can we really fight against the Lord? And what nation doesn't at some point or another have to answer to the Lord? None escape. Go back and look at the history of the world. What nation doesn't eventually suffer for turning against the Lord? How many nations can you think about in our lifetimes that have completely changed or no longer exist?
There's a few. Soviet Union is probably the biggest.
Soviet Union fell, turned into Russia, and it's nowhere near what it once was.
A lot of those African nations have changed names. They still seem to have the same borders, but they've changed names.
Yugoslavia got divided into its three original nations.
A lot of that in Africa.
Think about this one. In the 1800s, the British Empire had rose up to where it had over 1/3 of the earth. In the last 40 years, it has came down to where it is the island of Britain.
Yeah, it's said back in history that the sun never went down on its navy or its military force, meaning it was initially way back in the 1800s and all earlier. They were everywhere.
They were everywhere.
I was just talking about, it's easy for us in the Old Testament to focus on Israel and thank God that focusing on Israel primarily because that's what it's all about. But John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world."
The world.
It didn't say, "For God so loved the Jews." Okay?
Yeah. And like I mentioned, some prophets went and spoke to nations. Jonah in particular went to Nineveh.
Yeah, sure. God wanted him to go there.
And God wanted to go there, and what did they do?
Became God-fearing people.
Became God-fearing people, and here's what we expect. Well, they should have been proselyted. That's what the Jews said. They should have been proselyted. They should have been changed. Where do you read in the book of Jonah of all the men of Nineveh repenting and being circumcised? God never expected that because that was not the covenant that he had with them. That covenant was for Israel. If somebody said, I want to become a part of Israel, then that's what they had to do.
But it didn't last. I mean, Obadiah's letter to them is.
It didn't last. 100 years later, they're back in the same boat. But what about that generation?
They did what was right. Or
Yeah.
They did what God said.
Right. So
Or they did at least what the king said.
what the king said to do, the king said to do this, and they did it. We don't know how long it lasts. We don't know how many were faithful to the end. But they sure repented, and they sure tried, and God did spare them. He relented from his punishment. What about Naaman the leper, the Syrian, or the Syrian? He was cleansed, he repented, and he went home to only worship the God of Israel. He didn't become a proselyted Jew, but he went home. Only thing in his superstitious mind, and like if we lived at that time, we'd have the same thing. I don't want to take home 2 mounds of earth so I can put that down and build an altar and worship the God of Israel there. If I have some earth from Israel, then I can have the God of Israel with me. Did he really need it? Only for his own conscience. Notice, let the nations be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, go down, for the winepress is full, the vats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Like you brought it up, like the Amorites of the day, or it might have been that Amorites' iniquity is not yet full. A lot of things God does is over patience until it's reached the fullness. And here he says, the vats overflow, their wickedness is great. It's time not for me just to judge my nation. I've already done that. Now I'm going to judge all the nations because they're more wicked than my people. And it's a time of judgment.
Do we know that that ever happened, or is he talking about another time?
Well, as much as these nations around Israel would sell out Israel, eventually every one of them befell the same captivity as Israel, to the point as many of them don't even exist today. So in a sense, it did happen. Along that time when the Greeks started conquering, they didn't just conquer Israel. In fact, Israel basically surrendered to them. They saw fit. They had the writings of Daniel. They knew what was to befall. So when they see them coming, they're like, hey, here's what you're supposed to do. They're the ones that sent them on according to legend, they're the ones that sent Alexander, and when he after he conquered Tyre and Sidon, and went out and met them and told them, you're supposed to go to Persia. Show them what God has said in Daniel. Were they part of the Greek Empire? Yeah. He sent soldiers down there to oversee them. So they basically, hey, we're not going to fight you. But here's where you're supposed to be. This is your real conqueror. And that's what he did. Oh, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near the valley of decision. The sun and moon will go dark, and the stars will diminish their brightness. The Lord also will roar from Zion, and utter his voice from Jerusalem. The heavens and earth will shake. But the Lord will be a shelter for his people and the strength of the children of Israel. So you shall know that I am the Lord your God, dwelling in Zion, my holy mountain. Then Jerusalem shall be a holy, and no alien shall ever pass through her again. Now there's an interesting question. Is he talking about literally Jerusalem?
That's why I asked that question earlier, because none of this sounds like.
There is the literal and there is the figurative. And it's mixed in together. You have the literal that I am going to judge all these nations and they will be held accountable. But then you have that point of going the shelter for his people and the strength of the children of Israel. He is looking at the coming kingdom. He's looking at that kingdom that Nebuchadnezzar saw made without hands, that will destroy all the nations, take down all those kingdoms. And the people outside of that won't be able to stand, but the people within it will be his. And that Jerusalem, as Paul will speak of it, the heavenly Jerusalem.
It seems to me that God had a direct hand in the rise and fall of fleshly nature back in the Old Testament.
I'll do you one better. God's got a direct hand in it today.
That's what I'm gonna ask.
Nebuchadnezzar said,
He seems to be more concerned with spiritual things today than back in the Old Testament. Perhaps more concerned with spiritual kingdoms and so on and so forth. He's obviously very concerned with the church, but to what extent does he still make nations fall and rise today? Does he do that to the same degree he did in the Old Testament?
well, I think in the same way he did in a lot of it back then, he does today. Nebuchadnezzar said, God rules in the kingdoms of men. He brings them up. I don't know who raises up, how God raises up men to be president of this nation. Sometimes he does it for our good, and sometimes he does it for our bad. All of it is to make us wake up and see that we need God. That we can't put our trust in these things. Don and I were talking this morning and talking about somebody that was a crooked politician, and I'm sitting there while he's talking, and I'm like, is there anything such as an honest politician? I mean, I think some may start out and want to be, but, is that the reality of it? I remember a movie back in the 80s, the guy actually says, I'm a politician, and what that means is, when I'm not kissing babies, I'm still in their lollipops. And so, how God chooses and moves them into that point, I don't know, but I believe that he does. We put our trust in that he's going to do that. He's going to take care of us. We pray for our leaders. Is that not for intervention? Now, why does God do the things that he does, and why has he always done the same kind of things? To get people to look at the spiritual, not the fleshly.
When Paul told the Athenians at the Areopagus that God made every man on the planet from one man.
Yeah.
And he's the one that determined the boundaries and the periods that nations would exist.
Yeah. That's still true today.
Made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him, yet he is actually not far from each one of us. He's speaking in the past tense there.
Here it comes.
He might be in an aorist tense where he's still constantly doing it.
Well, I have to look it up, but at the same time, looking at it and knowing this, did God know when beforehand Babylon would fall? Of course he did. He had foreknowledge. Here's the thing, and he probably determined when that was with him. What did he tell Abraham why he could not have the land? He promised Abraham, but he said, you will not have it. It is for your descendants, because the Amorites' iniquity is not yet full. But what did he tell him? 4 generations, 400 years.
It is the aorist active tense on that having determined So he's not speaking in the past tense, he's speaking in present and future tense.
Present and future in a way that sounds past tense.
Yeah.
But it carries on. Because if we really look at it, if we can really understand the foreknowledge of God, in his mind, everything says so certain to happen as he has planned it out, it's already happened. So even when he speaks in that future tense, it's already happened in his mind because it's guaranteed to happen. And it takes nothing away from free will. It just he knows the intervention he makes that will change things.
Yeah, we don't understand the mechanics, but we can understand that he says he's going to do it.
Yeah. So it's still there. God is still in control of this world. He may let the devil think he has control, but he really doesn't. And everything that happens in this world is, and then I think this is really what Romans 8:28 applies to, works out for the good of those who love the world, Lord. It brings men to repentance. It ensures men to stay in their faith. And it causes the kingdom to survive. Isaiah said, chapter 50, my word will not return to me void, it will do what I have sent it forth to do. That's perfect. I think the actual word, it will accomplish what I have sent it to accomplish.
And that might be what he means by saying, you know, I'm going to bring all nations into the valley of Jehoshaphat, the valley of decision. All nations, as all nations hear the gospel, you got to make a decision.
Yeah.
He's gathering everybody together by sending that gospel message out to everybody, and you got to make a decision. That's what Jehoshaphat means, making a decision.
Yeah.
The valley of decision is what he called it in the last couple
Yeah,
verses. So maybe that's what he meant by
that's exactly what it is, because all of this is pointing to the gospel and the time of Christ and the church. And then Jesus would make the statement that the law and the prophets was until John. And now is the kingdom of heaven, and all men are pressed into it. And we've taken that word and we looked at it, and it says forced, or trying to take it by force. But what it is all men have to make this decision. They're forced to make a decision. Like it or not. You can sit there and say, well, I don't care, I'm not going to do anything. Well, you just made a decision.
no decision is a decision.
Yeah, no decision is a decision. And just like that point there, if we really go back and understand the Old Testament, there was as much there trying to get people's spiritual lives right as there was their physical lives right. It was done more in a fleshly manner, trying to point to them. Because that's what men were looking for. That's what they understood. God's people. And it will come to pass in that day that the mountains shall drip with new wine, the hills shall flow with milk, and all the brooks of Judah shall be flooded with water. A fountain shall flow from the house of the Lord and water the valley of Achaeus. Is that a song we feel? Sing. There is a fountain filled with blood. Huh?
Drawn from Emmanuel's veins.
Drawn from Emmanuel's veins, God with us. Jesus said, I told the woman at the well, if you knew who you're talking to, you'd be asking me for water, so that you'd never be thirsty again.
when he talked about the gospel, he said you don't put new wine in old wineskins.
Yeah,
So, the new wine is reference to the gospel.
yeah, all this is reference to the hills will flow with milk. What does milk do? It nourishes. Just as water refreshes.
Free.
So, and this isn't talking about physical, it's talking about spiritual. No, Egypt shall be a desolation, Edom a desolate wilderness, because of violence against the people of Judah, for they have shed innocent blood in their land. But Judah shall abide forever in Jerusalem from generation to generation. Is Egypt desolate? It's a desert. Edom doesn't exist anymore. Nobody lives where Edom used to be. You have scatters of people, but you don't have a great nation up on that mountain. It says, I'll bring judgment on them, but it's not going to be a place where the Spirit can flourish. Because the Spirit, my kingdom's not going to be there. But what about Jerusalem? What about Judah? If we get the Old Testament, if we take time to really look at it, from the time of Pentecost, so they didn't really understand it, God starts speaking of spiritual Israel as being his people.
I think he was here too, they just haven't figured it out. They just never figured it out. I think he is here too. He's talking
Oh yeah, right here he's doing it.
because Judah doesn't abide.
Right. So, and that's what I'm saying, that the fulfillment of this is it ties right in where Peter's sermon, it just goes right in those days. In that day, this is what will be.
Yeah.
The gospel call will be forth from Zion. It'll begin in Jerusalem. And his people will abide forever. What's on the temple site in Jerusalem?
Dawn's the rock.
A mosque. These are parts of the Old Testament the modern day Jew don't even want to talk about. Because what they'll do is they'll have to say, well, that's in the future. That's when the Messiah comes. If they'll admit there's a Messiah coming. Because even they know.
And they don't even realize they missed it.
Yeah, they don't realize it. And think about this point. They'll call themselves Israel. Why won't they call themselves a Judean?
Well, almost 2/3 of them are of Arab descent now, which is really odd, but yeah.
But there you go. The ones that are, that other third, that are all Jew,
They can't prove.
they don't know what tribe they're in. In fact, it's so intermixed that there really isn't a distinction of tribes anymore. So they don't claim allegiance to any tribe. They're really not any better than the Samaritans were at Christ's time. But notice, for I will acquit them of the guilt of bloodshed, whom I have not acquitted, for the Lord dwells in Zion. For Where I have not forgiven, I will forgive.
As the Gentiles,
That is Gentiles, that is Jews alike. In Matthew 16:18, Simon Peter answered and said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus answered and said to him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. It will survive from generation to generation, and Jerusalem will stand forever." That Jerusalem he's speaking of in Joel is the church. I think it's great that Peter starts out on Pentecost going to Joel, because it points us to that. We can see that division in Joel right there in the middle of chapter 2, where he's been talking about the physical things he's going to do, the physical punishment he's doing to Israel, and then the redemption of all people who will become Israel. That would come through the church. That's my personal thought on it. Don, what was your song?
Lord, I'm coming home.
Coming home. The only home we can really have is the Lord's home. Let's stand and sing.
I can do the first one. I wandered far away from God. Now I'm coming home. The paths of sin too long I've trod. Lord, I'm coming home. Coming home. Coming home. Never more to roam. Open thine arms of love. Lord, I'm coming home. Thank you, Brother Doug.
Heavenly Father, thank you